Okay, this is take two of the arena with Chris and myself. Uh, I'm sorry. First off, I'm going to apologize for I'll call it the lack of our human element on social media over the last few weeks. We are just screaming on all cylinders from a show perspective and an app perspective. And then I got deathly sick. So I've been basically in bed for the last 7 days after
You had
two.
105 temp, dude.
Yeah, sustained for like 3 days. It was yeah, it was I don't get sick very often, maybe every, 4 or 5 years, but when I do, it just my body's basically saying stop. And so,
Yeah. Alert, alert, alert.
yeah, it was a good reset because as someone who has a lot on his plate, um, I was frustrated at first and I tip my hat to you, Chris, because what did you say when you said, what did you say?
I said everything happens for a reason. And I would not be surprised if God was telling you to slow down and break you a bit, let you get broken a little bit so that
Yeah.
you would be able to slow down to see some breadcrumbs in front of you, our daily bread. And sometimes we miss them when we're going 180 miles an hour and dealing with life.
Yeah, for sure. And so that little encouragement totally made me reset earlier this week because I took it like that. And I'm like, okay, God, you want me not like I couldn't get out of bed. I did not have the energy to like lift myself out of bed. And so ironically, I put a Bible next to me and I read a lot of the New Testament this week. And then I got to watch down the entire docuseries in a single day, which I have never done actually. And that's what I was. That's one of the benefits of being sick is I got to go through something that I normally wouldn't have the time to do, and it just made me realize how excited I am to bring the show to everyone, but then also that hey, there's more subtle stories in the entire 7 episodes when you watch them back to back than you realize, or than I realized, and that's where it got exciting. And so yeah, it's even though I'm extremely beat up, I'd say my brain is working at about 62% right now. Um, I like this week was it was highly needed. So I'm hoping by Monday I'll be at like 80%. But yeah, so apologies guys for kind of being more what's the word, mechanical on social media for the last few weeks. But it's because we're flying. So this is what's exciting. This podcast drop is called Broken Shepherds. And Broken Shepherds is our technology. We've kind of hinted at it online. We've briefly mentioned it. We've had a lot of people asking when they can beta test, and we've been quiet because it is a massive undertaking. I mean, like I would argue, we're building something more robust than Airbnb meets a dating app like Hinge. That's how big of this technology tool. Actually, it's way bigger because we've scraped databases that no one scraped, and we're aggregating data that's no one's aggregated. So we've been quiet because we've been refining that. We've been, of course, jumping over hurdles like in any business. And then I, of course, have never worked in the tech space, and so this was a massive undertaking going from a complete novice to somewhat of an intermediate in regards to understanding technology. But yeah, so this conversation is strictly about broken shepherds, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you because without you, number one, broken shepherds would not be happening. So thank you. And then without your direction and leadership as a business entrepreneur, doors wouldn't open that have opened. And so I want to tell everybody how grateful I am for Chris as a business partner and as a friend and as a brother. Um,
Likewise, dude.
but so I want people to know why Chris signed up for this cowboy journey with Nathan. And it wasn't really, yes, the religion business is part of it, but why did you get excited about this opportunity?
Well, it's definitely a cowboy business for sure. Um, So for me, in this chapter of my life, I wanted to do something good for humanity, right? I mean, I entrepreneurial background, capitalist, and I've had some very fortunate opportunities in my business career, my military career as well too. And I really like my soul is yearning to solve things, to do good for humanity. And so I looked at like the mental health space for a while, and then came along, met Nathan, and got to learn a little bit about what he was doing with the religion business. And the thing that aligned us the most was not just like, yeah, there's some serious issues that are there, especially as I learned more and more data of Nathan's 12-year research journey. I learned more and more data. I had a ton of light bulb moments, but then thinking, wow, if we could solve the problems that are uncovered, and we call them, a lot of it, they're loopholes within the system, but the underlying theme of everything is there's a complete lack of transparency. So how do we within the nonprofit sector? So I got excited about, talk about a breadcrumb, like this conversation that I heard um, people doing multiple videos and stitches on was a UN dev economist challenging Elon Musk on Twitter, then Twitter. This was 4 years ago, saying, "Hey, Elon, why don't you sell, $6 billion worth of stock and fund world hunger? You could solve it." And he says, "Okay, well, I'd be happy to do that. One condition, though." Open source accounting for the public to see how the money's being spent. And then the problem didn't get solved. So for me, it was like, that's the issue. That's why these things aren't getting solved is there's no transparency, no accountability. So I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to be a part about bringing some light into a world that's operated uh, in a dark area. And it's a dark area because there's no transparency and humans will human in a world of no transparency. It just, that's why all these loopholes that Nathan discovered, every single one of them is tied to transparency.
Mhm.
So everything's always going to go back to transparency, accountability, everything.
Yeah, that's a great note. And a lot of people are interested in like how broken shepherds or how well, first we should cover two things. I just want to clarify that the journey, the 12-year journey of the religion business, where I really got to intimately understand the nonprofit sector and the regulations that undergird it. Um, that is where the potential solutions came from. It was from the research and from the individuals I got to sit down with where I started seeing a pattern. And for anybody who doesn't really know me or Chris that well, I will say confidently that I am just stupid enough to always fall forward. And so I do believe my creator will put little breadcrumbs in front of me because I'm not smart enough to see the full vision, but I'm
I
smart
think
enough,
you're
or
smart enough to fall forward, not dumb enough to fall forward.
there you go. I'm not smart enough to see the full vision, but I'm smart enough to fall forward. And I'll always grab that next breadcrumb. And so for 12 years, there was these small breadcrumbs to where one morning I woke up and I said, oh, there's a solution to this. And this is about 3 years ago now. And I started sketching a technology tool out in my head. Um, and the reason is we need to understand when you look at the technology tool, you have to look at the nonprofit sector as a whole and say, okay, what is the nonprofit sector? And you learn this in the series. How was it defined? What did Congress do to define it? What was the purpose, the core purpose of that nonprofit sector in 1913? And that purpose was building local social capital. So it was raising up local communities, and it was organizations in those local is the big word. In those local communities, it was raising up the social capital.
It should complement government services, right? To your point, like that's why they have a tax exemption, right? Because it's a very special thing that needs to be done within the community
Yeah.
uh, for numerous reasons.
Correct. So local social capital is the defining element of the nonprofit sector. And so when I started seeing these loopholes and these issues, I said, well, it can either be an external solution or an internal solution. And what I mean by that is it can either be external, which is government. Government can come in and clean up the loopholes, or an internal solution, which is, hey, the nonprofits or in these religious organizations or people who are passionate about it can solve the problems. And I'm always a more power to the people type of player. I am naturally a man that questions authority. And so I would rather have solutions be brought to the table from kind of outsiders than lean on the government. And so that is where the inception of Broken Shepherds came from. And so that is the lens I see Broken Shepherds through, and the solution through is this is a non-governmental solution that gives full accountability and full transparency to the donor, and the donor holds the power. And that is right now, the system is totally opposite of that. It's the nonprofits hold all the power, and the donors really just have to have faith that their money is being stewarded properly and used properly. And so that is what we're here to do. Broken Shepherds is here to flip that paradigm, to give power back to the people and the donor, and they know where their money's going. Because here's the kicker: Americans, and American Christians in particular, are the most generous people in the world, and their giving could radically transform the world if the resources were stewarded better with accountability. And so we present that argument in the show, and Broken Shepherds is a solution to the loopholes that kind of seize up the machine, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's like one thing that I feel is not a debatable thing by solution. This isn't a debatable item when there's definitions that are very clear. Nonprofits are businesses. They are. And if you're a publicly traded business and you're receiving money from the public and people are investing, you can find out their revenue, their expenses, their top officer salaries, who their board of directors are, all sorts of great information. It's available to the public. The nonprofit side, and then even in a privately held company, if I'm going to invest in a privately held company, I want to know that financial information. I want to know because in a business, this rule applies. And if not, your business will fail. What's measured gets managed.
Hmm.
What's measured gets managed. So if things are not being measured, it's not getting managed. And when you're
So explain
operating the
that.
number,
So are you saying like if salaries are measured, if expense accounts are measured, then that money is managed more properly?
100%. And then it goes even further than that. It goes to the overall impact, right? Those are all part of, a dollar comes in, and what happens with that dollar? X percent's going to salaries. And we know some of the statistics we've seen, it's about 44% ish, right? Buildings and maintenance, fundraising, all these types of things. And then in the end, in the religious side in particular, only 6% ever leaves the institutional walls.
We're talking
So
about
it's
just to clarify, you're talking about specifically churches, religious organizations at this moment.
correct.
Yeah.
I'm spelling out the data on that one. And the reason
Yeah.
why I am for our listeners is there's a big understanding here. We've talked about this several times, but you haven't heard us say this. And if you heard us say it, I apologize. But, we got the nonprofit sector, right? In the United States, it's about 1.9 million nonprofits, right? About 400,000 of those are religious institutions. The rest fall on this line of secular nonprofits. Religious institutions don't turn any financial documentation into the IRS. No revenue, no expenses, no nothing. The secular ones do via a Form 990 that has a lot of this pertinent data. So the reason why I was talking more on the religious side is because it is a darker arena where there's more loopholes to take advantage of on that side. Definitely
Gotcha.
over here too, but a lot over there. So that's why I was focusing on the religious sector for the example I was given about the 6% and the 44% and the fundraising and the buildings and maintenance.
So what is measured is managed. I think that's a great statement to kind of almost slap on top of Broken Shepherds, because Broken Shepherds is nothing but a a measurement tool. And we're trying to bring all the data of an organization to the forefront for a donor to educate them on their giving dollars and where their giving goes. And so, yeah, why the name Broken Shepherds?
Yeah, I loved going through that exercise with you, Nathan. I loved it when we were figuring out what we were gonna. I think it there's humility in it. I'm a I'm I'm called to be a leader in this world. You are people who lead religious institutions, nonprofits. We're leaders. That's we are. We're called to be leaders. You could use the term shepherd, but we're broken. We're not the good shepherd. We're not. It's why we have a good shepherd is because we're broken and we need accountability. I need accountability. You need accountability. And that's a very not the easiest thing to accept, especially when you've been operating in a world of no accountability for so long. And it's why would anyone question me? Well, you know, in any business environment, you have to operate with your partners or your members in a realm of transparency to have that trust there. So it's that concept of we're all broken shepherds and we need accountability. If we're going to be leaders of these organizations, we need that accountability. So let's hold one another accountable. And perhaps I think it's a good lead into, that's why we call it broken shepherds. But what exactly is broken shepherds? What are from the concept of who's on the platform, how does the system work, what are we measuring? At least from the V1 element of it, you and I have some amazing plans that we're not going to reveal just yet, but are pretty awesome when we talk about V2, V3.
Yeah, it's exciting. So Broken Shepherds is the name of our technology. Um, the simplest pitch that I'll make is it's a dating app. It's going to install on your phones. There'll be a desktop version as well. Um, the phone version is 99% coded and done. The desktop version is almost done as well. We will be bringing a small handful of beta organizations on in the next couple weeks. So we're super excited to test that. And the app will be launching simultaneously with the show. The app is a dating app, and it pits congregants and churches together, and then it pits donors and nonprofits together. And the goal is in any dating scenario is you want to put your best forward or best foot forward. Sorry, my brain is not functioning at full capacity right now. You want to put your best foot forward, which means, you want to wear your nicest outfit, you want to look good, you want to say the right things. And so the goal is, hey, an organization, a church or a nonprofit should want to put their best foot forward. And in that world, what is your best foot? It's I want to be honest. I want to be held to account. I want to know that you can trust me with your resources. And so that is what the quick elevator pitch of Broken Shepherds is. And I would say it's a playful app. It's not copy heavy. It's not like reading a medical journal. It's fun. It's like I'm going to say a dating app like Hinge meets Airbnb. It's just fun. It's clean. It's simple. But what you don't understand is the engine behind it is so complex and so robust that we've created a system where every nonprofit and church in the US has to play the game because they're in it already. They don't know it yet, but they are in our game. And
And
so,
that's a big difference between a dating app or any of those things, because in those situations, you don't have a profile already to go claim. You're not already
yeah,
sitting in that database.
correct.
If you're a nonprofit, you're going to be in this database.
Okay, great point on you got to play. You're in our app. Um, what people don't realize is we've kind of created, which again, I fall forward and I'll pick up this breadcrumb. It wasn't even my strategy that thought of this, but what we created is game theory. We basically created the Hunger Games of the nonprofit sector. So at Hunger Games, you have to play the game. to survive. And it's the same thing in our app. If you have filed for tax exemption, you are in our app. So you got to play the game. And if you want that tax exemption, get ready to play. And what does that mean? It means you got to be accountable and transparent. And it means this is the big one. You can't spend money to get out of it. A lot of times it's like if there's an internal, um, if something bad happens, or like at a church, or a nonprofit, if someone steals money, they can kind of bury it. PR could come in, clean it up. You could spend money on marketing. That can't happen in our app. So we're bringing democracy into the nonprofit sector, so to speak, from a, hey, the more accountable and transparent you are, the higher rated you are. You can't outspend the smaller guys. It's if you're being accountable, you rank higher. And that's one of the beautiful things about Broken Shepherds is it democratizes the landscape in the nonprofit sector.
100%. And so you've got these nonprofits they go in, they claim their profile. The nonprofit is in control of how high of a rating that they get, a transparency rating. We call it the light rating. They have to feed the data they have to feed the system. They have to feed the system financials, top officer salaries, revenue, expenses. How do we measure impact, right? For the missions that people are doing, all of that type of data. And what we're not, though, we're not the arbiter of the power goes to the donors. It's not coming to us. We're not the arbiter of Pastor X should only make Y. He shouldn't get a housing allowance, a penalty. No, no, no. We are our system that we've got a patent pending on is increasing your rating based upon you providing data. We're not saying, oh, it needs to be 10% or 20% of overall expenses. Not at all. That's for the donor to realize. The donor once they're nonprofit to have private jets and all that kind of stuff. That's on them. That's
Yeah,
freedom,
it's
making the
power to the donor.
choice.
Yeah, it's hey, like Chris, like just to let you know, so I'll be Broken Shepherds here. You look at your church, and oh man, my pastor Steve makes 4.2 million a year. Like if you are comfortable with that, then you're
That's
going to
on
continue.
me.
That's
It's
on
a
you.
decision I make. I earn my
Yeah,
money. I'm going to
yeah,
make that decision and such. But I have a feeling that most people are going to give
yeah,
shrewdly because
yeah.
we're not here to attack people's faiths.
Mhm.
Okay. The Broken Shepherds is for all nonprofits, denominations, and everything. It's not, if you're accepting donations to a nonprofit, this is the space.
Yeah.
So you'll have an opportunity to learn who's the most transparent, study them up, learn what their missions are, their impact, get to see nice visuals of it as well too. And then you can make that decision and we'll facilitate the donation aspect. You can donate. And then we're calculating all that for you, tracking all that for you. It's very, there's a lot of fun games to it. And then you get a nice printout at the end of the year so you can give to your CPA when you file taxes. It's all been there in the system. You don't need to leave the system. Um, Nathan, a question that continues to pop up, right? We've had two major disasters recently. We had the disaster in North Carolina. We had the wildfires in California. And I cannot tell you how many times on feeds on social media I saw, does anyone know of a good nonprofit I can give to? Does anyone know how I can volunteer? Does anyone know I
Mhm.
can help? And this app is going to solve those problems because they're going to see vetted nonprofits, right? If they have an impact study, that's something that they might be able to see as well too, or they will be able to see. And then on top of that, the volunteer portal aspect of it.
Well, we're covering a ton here, so let's focus on this is great, but so let's talk about the disasters. To your
Yeah,
point, Americans and most people really want to help. And so what that means though is when people really want to help, there's also people on the opposite side that don't have the best intentions that leverage the generosity and what we call in the show the indifference of givers. And so people want to give. It makes you feel good to help people. It makes you feel good that you're giving money to a cause. But there's a double side to that. Yeah, you get that dopamine kick and it feels good, but you should want to and demand a follow up on where that money is given and how it's used. And so in the app, let's take the LA fires for example. There is a trending page where you see immediate need for support. And in this page in the app, you will be able to click on it and it would say, LA fires. And underneath it would be a quick description and then very specific charities that have been vetted in that region that are on the ground already. And the app is going to solve a lot of problems that most people won't foresee. Because an example is I lived in Maui, and when the Lahaina fire happened, um, I knew of organizations. Actually, I just moved from Maui, but I knew organizations that are on the ground in Hawaii, Hawaiian organizations that were like ready to get in there. But global nonprofits and national nonprofits with big marketing money started spending money saying, hey, started marketing saying, hey, help us support the Lahaina fires. And they raised a ton of money. And what did they do? They flew their jumbo jets across the world and landed. And I have buddies that are firefighters there. They were pulling pallets of water off these planes. Like, what a joke and a waste of resources. And so our goal is to get resources to strategic nonprofits that are on the ground already. So it's not about the nonprofit that can market the best or have the flashiest campaigns to raise money. It's about the nonprofits that are what? Building local
Local
social
social
capital,
capital.
that are there in the community, lifting that community up. And so that's what's cool about the trending page is you're not going to just give to the Red Cross, which we talk about the Red Cross in the show. You're not going to just give to this global nonprofit. You're going to have the opportunity to see, because the Red Cross is going to be equally in line with, let's call it $1 million organization that's on the ground in LA, but that 90 cents of every dollar is going to impact in LA. You're going to get to pick and choose. You're going to say, man, like this animal rescue facility has 70 horses that came out of the Palisades and they need feed. Boom, I'm going to pay for that feed right now. Here you go. And it goes right to them. You can get this trending page gives you direct ties into these specific disasters. And so we always say that Broken Shepherds is the town square of the nonprofit sector. So it's where we're bringing all the voices into one cohesive hub to where we can solve local, national, and global social issues, because there'll be one cohesive voice and everybody can expand and play in it. But it's like we're here to solve problems. And a lot of that comes down to lack of accountability, or a lot of the issues with not solving problems comes down to lack of accountability, lack of transparency, and then breakdown in communication. And so Broken Shepherds is the potential solution for that. And then you had mentioned the volunteer portal. So I would love to volunteer with my daughter once a week. It's really hard to actually find volunteer efforts in my community. And I hear this from a lot of people. And so another page on our app is a volunteer page. So we aggregate all the data in your surrounding area for volunteer efforts. So I can click on that volunteer page and see 7 days out within whatever my mileage radius I choose in the app where I'm geotagged, it'll show me those volunteer efforts. And so any day of the week, I can jump on and say, man, what's happening within my 10-mile radius that I could go and support? And you just spin through it. Oh, there's a food pantry that needs help stocking shelves. I could do that. Oh, there's an elderly community that has game night, and you can come play with the community. You can come play games with the community. I can start thumbing through and just seeing all the volunteer efforts within my area. So I no longer have to say, man, I wish I could volunteer. And I wish like I could find opportunities. It's just hard to find them, which right now it is. So now we are becoming we will become the hub, the town square hub of volunteer efforts. And all of that is based off of the um, the fact that every nonprofit has to play the game. And so it's, yes, Broken Shepherd is about accountability and transparency, but it's also about communication and connecting the world really to solve global problems, local, so national and global problems.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Nathan, one of the interesting stories that I've heard. This goes back to what's measured gets managed and accountability and transparency. If you could touch on when you were doing work in Uganda and what some of the people that are doing amazing work there had said about their run-ins with churches in our country that have stepped up to help them raise money for their cause. Like what was the feedback you got on that?
Yeah, so good intentions pave the way to hell. And that is a one of our flagship statements. Good intentions pave the way to hell. I talked to lots of organizations in Uganda, and um, mainly Christian organizations would go over, for short-term missions. They'd love on the kids. They'd hang out for a week. Some would take photos of all the kids and they say, "Hey, we're going to go raise you a bunch of money in the States." They'd come back to the States, and years later, nothing would ever get back. Come to find out, one organization did this. They raised about $450,000. They took photos of all the kids, and not a single donation ever made it to the orphanage, to the school. And like I said, good intentions paved the way to hell. I think those people had good intentions. I think they came back to the States. I think they started raising money and they needed a salary because they were doing all this work. And then, man, America's not a cheap place to live, and things get expensive. And before you know it, you raise 450 grand and boom, 450 grand disappears. You know how quick 450 grand can go. And so, I, in Uganda, I got to see, man, there's just breakdown in communication, and there's breakdown in strategic ways to get money to these charities and money to these organizations. And Christ was always about the least of these. You know, um, he was about the orphaned and the widowed. He was about the hungry, the thirsty, the naked, the sick, the imprisoned. Um, and right now, I feel like I'm going to say the Christian model is upside down, but then the nonprofit model, the secular nonprofit model is upside down as well. Um, and it's no one person's fault. It's just that's what happens when we build machines and institutions. Um, and so it's how do we flip the model? And, I visited schools, boarding schools with orphaned boarding schools. Um, one in particular was serving 24,000 meals a month. They had 800 children in dorms getting full state certified education. And these are street kids. So kids that just end up, that have, some of them were found a couple days old, just thrown out on the streets, the literal orphans. Um, and they have 110 employees, and their operating budget is about $22,000 a month. Let that
Yeah,
sink in. 24,000 meals, 800 beds, 800 kids getting a schooling, 800 kids going into the workforce now as employable with Christian values of morality and humanity baked in. Um, and their operating budget is less than I'm going to say, a lot of pastors' housing allowances.
yeah,
And
that's a
so
lot of impact, man.
a lot of impact. And so, this is the type of data that we want to show people, because it's like, hey, if you have a care for, um, parentless children in Africa. Um, and it's fun because I've had to break a lot of my biases too. I thought, oh man, maybe one day I'll adopt a child from Africa, but the African government, Ugandan government doesn't, they said no more adoptions, no more out of country adoptions. We want our youth here. Our youth is the next generation to raise Uganda out of poverty. And so, man, if I can take my bias lens off of like, man, I want to be this savior and adopt a
Yeah.
child, which is inherently not a bad thing. But if I said, man, how about I instead invest my resources into a program like Mercy that's lifting an entire community in a major metropolitan city out of poverty, and it would cost me not, nothing. Like, let's do that. And so, and then of course there's other breakdowns too. There's how do you get the money? And this is what Broken Shepherds is. I'm so excited about with Broken Shepherds. How do you get the money actually to the organization in Uganda? And right now, um, you could speak to this, but bureaucracy is a real thing. And there's companies that you can donate to that will get that money to that organization in
Yeah.
Uganda. But what does that company do? They take a percentage. And sometimes it's as high as 30%. And so you have management companies now managing distribution payments and taking a rip. And it's
They're
like,
called
no,
donor advisor funds.
yeah, and it's like it's get that money, just get it to them. Let Ugandans, let these really smart, well educated. By the way, another bias I had to break is, man, I go to these developing nations and I think everybody's gonna, I think I'm gonna be the most educated one there. Not most of them. I'm like, one of them had two PhDs in one was like in trauma and social work. Like these are very educated people. And I'm like, man, just get them the money. Like they know, number one, how to uplift their own community. They know what local Ugandans need. I do not. And so it's getting the money quickly and efficiently to that end user to create change. That's one thing that Broken Shepherds is going to facilitate. So we're gonna get rid of that need for that middleman that'll take
Yeah.
up anywhere from 10 to 30% of every dollar just to manage that transaction. It's wild.
Yeah. There's plenty of middlemen in a lot of industries, right?
For
It's
sure.
a business model that gets created to solve a need, right? And then
Yeah.
it ends up getting taken advantage of, and then any business owners always trying to figure out. They're always trying to figure out, these are all businesses. How do we make more with less? How do we make more with less?
Yeah.
That is a constant discussion in every boardroom, whether it's in the nonprofit space or not. Those are just conversations that happen. And so just be transparent.
Yeah. So the app closes or exposes those 10 major loopholes, which we present in the show. And it basically brings a solution for each one. And most of them have to do with accountability. It's just knowing the numbers. But about 200 billion with a B, $200 billion a year of individual donor giving in America disappears into these 10 loopholes. If we can close or stopgap the majority of those loopholes, that money could radically transform the world, and it would really affect no one's bottom line. So if you like those Stephen Furticks, if you like that big stage type Christianity, if you don't mind that your pastor's worth 750 million bucks, this doesn't affect that. You can keep on doing that. All it does is it helps steward the money that's lost, that disappears, that's just straight stolen. Um, and so that's our goal is to empower the donor, and that's really through education and awareness. And then it's to help um, encourage generosity, but at the same time encourage impact. And in the show, you learn how development economists define impact. And right now, we're missing the mark both in the secular world and in the religious space on making impact. We're making a lot of things. We're doing a lot of things. we're building a lot of things, but there's not much impact. In fact, a lot of things are getting worse. And
Yeah.
with humility, we have to say, man, why? Why is homelessness getting worse? Why are our vets not being cared for? Have we like where are we missing the mark? And I
Well,
think
if
that
those
app is.
problems got solved, a lot of organizations wouldn't have money flowing to them anymore.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if, like, for example, I mean, this is a big example people use, right? Like, all the money that's been poured into the state of California to fix their homelessness. If homelessness got fixed or was a much smaller issue, organizations receiving, for example, 24 billion, multiple billions of dollars, including governments, and stuff, they wouldn't receive that money anymore. People get money because there's problems they're trying to solve. And if a problem gets solved, the money stops flowing in.
Mm,
So, what's the incentive to get it done as expeditiously as possible
I got you. So you're
for
saying
human?
so if I start a nonprofit, I will only get that tax exempt status if they agree that the mission of my organization, of my corporation, falls under what they define as a nonprofit, right? So if I say I want to eradicate um, sheltered animals, well, that's a bad word to use, eradicate. I want to help. I want to fix the shelter animal problem in Utah, um, and that's my goal. If for some reason I fix that problem, then I have no mission anymore, is what you're saying.
100%. So,
And
why
then
should you get any money?
I get it. So what you're saying is if I actually solve the problem that my organization is meant to solve, then the organization either has to shutter
Or
or
change its mission and go conquer
changes.
something else.
Gotcha. So I think that's the missing link right now is I think what you're saying is a lot of nonprofits have almost the machine, not necessarily the leadership, because there's a lot of good intentioned leaders out there. Um, but you're saying the machine almost has a self-preservation mechanism to it.
100%. And I think it's, if you look at the homelessness issue, for example, or the world hunger issue, for example, like, or something as low hanging fruit as like malaria or tuberculosis, like, um, as soon as those things are solved, that is billions, hundreds of billions of dollars probably that's being spent worldwide and donated by hardworking individuals is no longer needed for that.
Mm,
And then that means you no longer, if you operate that nonprofit, you're no longer receiving money. You are no longer tied to the great works that you're broadcasting, that you're doing. It's an identity thing as well too. It really yeah, we all have egos.
hmm. Yeah, this reminds me of Sister Rosemary. I got to hang out with Sister Rosemary. She's
Mother Teresa of Uganda.
yeah, Mother Teresa of Africa, basically. And she says this brilliant thing because you're going to learn about her in the show, and she is just a fireball of a woman. She's amazing. And she takes so much risk with very little in the bank. And and I'm always like, hey, like, how do you step out with such faith? And she goes, Nathan, I step out into the unknown. Where I see a need, I'm going to step out into that need and I'm going to find a solution. And she looks at me nonchalantly and she goes, because I know God is the unknown. And it's probably one of the most profound statements. And then she goes, because he's been there before me. And when you think about that, God is the unknown. It's if you believe if you're a Christian, the Bible says to fear God. Like the unknown is scary. Most people are terrified of the unknown.
Of
Um,
course. That's
so
where
what?
anxiety, like, that's almost the definition of anxiety, right?
Yeah. So what happens if I have a nonprofit that I'm so passionate about and I might solve something? It's going to put me into the unknown, right? You could even take this into the farm, like the health. What happens if we solved cancer? That's going to take the medical industry into the unknown. It's like I think humanity is so terrified of solving things because on the other side is the unknown.
You brought up a really good point, right? You sidestepped into another industry to try to draw like a little bit of a parallel, and I heard this thing on a podcast. It's actually, I think, Tucker Carlson podcast, and he's like, if a talking about the medical industry, like if a and then relating it to a fish. If a fish is sick, you don't drug the fish, you clean the tank.
Yeah.
So if you have to find out the root cause of a problem and solve at that. And that's why we keep saying transparency, accountability, because that's what we have to solve for. Because those loopholes are tied to those things. And if we can fix that problem, which is what we're aiming to do, all of these things are going to start getting solved. They
Mhm.
just are.
Yeah. Philip Hackney, um, he's one of the leading experts in the
Big
US,
brain.
big brain on the nonprofit sector. Used to work for the former chief counsel. He oversaw the nonprofit sector. Um, he says in the show, he goes, Nathan, light is the best disinfectant. Just turn the lights on. And what people are going to realize is through the docuseries is the religious exemptions in the US are the darkest form of business in all of the US. So, what is supposed to be the arbiter of truth, these religious organizations are supposed to be the beacon of light and the arbiter of truth. Their corporate structure is the darkest and most sinister form of corporation it can have, or we could have. And so, what's being preached from the pulpits and taught is running antithesis to what their organizational structure is. And so that has to change. Just a conflict of interest destroys everything. Like
Yeah.
I wrote this down actually last night. Um, Religion is the self-appointed arbiter of truth and accountability and moral courage, right? The
Yeah.
NGO sector, the nonprofit sector, was defined and built on this concept of local social capital. Today, both ecosystems often run antithesis to this because of the system itself. And so the system, and it's
Powerful.
we always have to go down to the basis of the problem. It's not the Kenneth Copelands and the Creflo Dollars and the Joel Osteens and the Ed Young Juniors of the world that are the problem. They're just a byproduct of it. Like these nonprofits you see scamming people, like these are just byproducts of the structural problem. And so that is what we're looking at and trying to take apart is we're all just byproducts of this cultural ecosystem and these guidelines and regulations that are archaic and outdated. And all we're doing right now, for the most part, is just pointing fingers at each other up top, and we're not looking at the root structure of the problem. And so we've looked at
Yeah.
the root structure. We dissect the root structure in the show, so people could start asking educated questions. And at the same time, we're presenting a technology tool that solves the majority of issues that have really come from modernity creeping in, technology. Um, but yeah, man, broken shepherds.
Yeah. I'm a broken shepherd.
So yeah,
You're
you know,
definitely a broken shepherd right now, boy.
oh, dude, I am wrecked, man. But yeah, so religion is the self-appointed arbiter of truth, accountability, and moral courage. Um, But today, the ecosystem, the business side of it, runs antithetical to that statement. And then you can do the same thing with the nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector was defined and created because it was building local social capital. And today, the ecosystem often runs antithesis to this idea. And so I think what people are so afraid of is the unknown, right? Having to look at a system and say, hey, it's time for reform is not easy. It takes humility. It takes slow and methodical internal reflection to realize, hey, I am a part of this, whether I want to say I am or not. I'm a byproduct of it, whether I want to say I am or not. And hey, I can be a part of the solution if I want to be. And if, this is the big one, and if my faith from a religious perspective actually aligns with the teachings of the faith, and if my passion for the nonprofit sector actually aligns with building local social capital, then guess what? I do believe you'll want the change. But if your faith is not really truth, accountability, and moral courage, if it's something else, then you won't like our show. And if your nonprofit or if your passion for it is not founded on building local social capital, you won't like the show either. Um, and the app, because that's where most of the abuse happens, I believe, is when you mission drift.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when we're like we don't give ourselves as humans enough credit, right? I mean, if you're a Christian, for example, yeah, and you've accepted Christ, the Holy Spirit, right, resides within you, and there's a lot of wisdom and knowledge that's there. And I feel like I'm guilty of this, is like I'm constantly looking for answers outside, but like we have to ask ourselves some questions because there's so much fear of the unknown. People have said, "Oh, this is going to crush the nonprofit sector." I disagree. I think
Yeah.
quite the opposite. I think ask yourselves how many times when one of these disasters happens have you wanted to help, but you don't know who you can trust? You don't know where to go. So, just in that instance alone, you would be giving more.
Yeah.
Just in that instance alone to impact.
Well,
And
and think about this. Like, Chris, if all of a sudden, if in 2026 we saw a drop of 15% in the homeless population in the US, and if you saw a drop of 20% in veteran suicides, and you saw a drop in 10% of deaths from tuberculosis in Africa, you'd realize, holy crap, problems are being solved. You'd almost want to I would personally double down on my giving. If I saw a cause, if I
yeah,
saw something that I was passionate about actually being solved, I would double down on it. And so I personally believe you're right that we won't be hurting the nonprofit sector. We're actually going to be helping it because we're going to be putting spotlights on this concept of building local social capital, and we're going to be turning the spotlights off. Um, and this is not us doing it; it's these organizations by their own actions are going to be doing
yeah.
it. But so yeah, I personally have so much excitement and um, passion for what's about to come. I think number one, reform is needed from a structural perspective, from a code perspective, and then number two, reform is needed from like a ethos perspective in the nonprofit sector, which includes religious organizations.
Reform's a huge word, and it's not one that is to be led with in a sense. Something has to happen before reform, and that's the purpose of, I'd say, the docu-series serves as a great source for this concept of transparency. You have to really see it fully to really truly understand there is a problem. This is where the problem is. I see it. It's transparent. We're not making stuff up. We'll have all the sources for our content out there. Then you're gonna go, okay, I've seen it. I've seen the light. Now it's time for reform because now we know what we're solving for. Um, Reforms go bad when when you don't know what you're solving for. What the hell are you reforming? What are
Hmm.
you reforming? And this is why we consistently will say transparency and accountability is the core of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's the core.
Yeah. I love it. I love it, man. Um,
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
yeah. So let's talk details. Like, where are we at with the app? What's our rollout plan?
Yeah. So slow is fast, hard is easy. We could have had this thing done and wrapped up a few months ago. In fact, our intention was we were going to go into beta a couple of months ago, and several nonprofits who've been great are like, "Hey, when beta testing, we need to make sure we get it right, answer a lot of questions, a lot of testing, um, and making sure that we have the right environment set up." All that being said, you mentioned it earlier where we're at. We're almost done coding V1, and completion of that is the again, we facilitate payments here. Um, we're so us plugging into the donation payment processing engine and fine tuning a few things on our end, doing some internal testing, and then we're going to be beta testing just a few nonprofits, and then we're going to expand that, and that should be, I'd say, probably 4 to 5 weeks realistically. And then in the month of February and the month of March, that will get expanded. We'll be doing some fine tuning and testing as a result of that, constant feedback loop. And then April 20th, it will go live for everybody at the same time we're releasing the show. And if you're a nonprofit, you'll have the opportunity to go in there and claim your profile, start to feed the system. If you're a donor congregant, set up your profile, get involved, spread the word. This is really going to solve a tremendous amount of problems. So we look forward to everyone's participation in it, their feedback, and everything. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's yeah. I would call it like a race. It's a race to transparency, right?
Yes.
Um, so from an organization perspective, whether that be religious or secular, it's a race to who can be the most accountable. And what is the prize for who can be most accountable? The prize from a secular perspective is potentially hundreds of thousands of donors being put in front of you, being getting to see what you do. And then from a religious perspective, it's, hey, every congregant in your area is going to see your church on their profiles, which means they're going to be putting, hey, Chris's church up against Nathan's church. And if you want to know what, Chris's church is far more accountable with their money, and their pastor's not taking a $5 million salary. Or maybe you just like Chris's message better. And hey, you want to know what? Chris is just seems like a more honorable guy. You're going to end up pulling part of my congregants. And the reason is because, hey, like it is a race to transparency. And it's a race to give the donor and the congregant the most data possible so they can make educated, wise decisions on where they use their time and their resource.
Yeah. I don't think I'm a meritocracy guy. I am. You know, whether you're on the sports field, whether you're doing a martial arts tournament, whether you're running a for-profit business, nonprofit business, meritocracy, and meritocracy, absolutely accountability, transparency, and how one performs. And in the nonprofit space, how are you solving problems and issues? How are you bringing local social capital and doing it transparently? And people see that you're going to be rewarded very heavily because your dopamine, your purpose in life, you're going to have an army of people behind you and with you and at your side, donating, volunteering, getting part of the cause. And everyone's going to feel so good
Mm-hmm.
because it's real, it's transparent, and stuff's getting solved.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big one. So when we talked about that middleman, taking that 10 to 30% when money goes over to Africa, there's another massive middleman um, that we solve, and that is marketing. There's a great organization we profile in the docu-series. They're a small organization from a numbers perspective. Their annual budget's about a quarter million, 250,000 bucks. They are a safe house in a rehabilitation home for girls that are sex trafficked um, in Africa. And I got to visit their homes. They do amazing work. 60, I think it's 60, it's either 60 or 70% of the one employee in the US's time is spent on fundraising and grant writing. and their entire operating budget's 250,000 a year. They have about 50 girls going through their home every year. That's 5,000 bucks. So if you look at impact, right? Their budget's 250 grand. They have 50 girls going through it. That's $5,000 per girl to get them off the street, rehabbed for 6 months, back into school, and then they either place them in a home or they get them reintegrated back with their family's home.
Local
Um,
social capital.
they're building that this org is building,
Yeah.
and they only have one employee in the US because that employee has to raise that 250 grand. But this is what's crazy. This is why I'm going to say 60 to 70%. I can't remember the number, but either 60 or 70% of this woman's time is spent strictly trying to raise money. So in the show, I asked her the question. I said, "What happens if you could spend that 60 to 70% of your time on something else?" And it literally caught her off guard because she's like, "This is just, it's what I have to do." And
Yeah. I
so,
wouldn't think it's possible.
so what happens though is if we could save that 35% and pour that 35% back into the actual concept
Transparent. Yeah.
of building local social capital. It's like the system has just grown to become this autonomous, self-perpetuating thing. And that's why most people, I know a lot of wealthy people that when they were retired, what did they do? They started a nonprofit, so they could put on some golf tournaments and some events and yeah, they'll take, they'll do a couple good things, but are we really trying to solve problems or are we trying to perpetuate uh, a system that we see as the right system right now? Because we don't know any better. And yeah, so that's what we're here to do, man. We're here to humbly dissect the system, and it's going to be painful. Pulling band-aids off is painful in the religion business, but then at the same time, um, strategically present a solution that I think will bring a lot of hope to a lot of people and a lot of excitement. Like you said, you nailed it on the excitement side of things.
Absolutely. And I listen, whatever bucket you fall into, whether it's, you completely disagree with us, agree with us or not, I encourage you to watch docuseries when it comes out. I do.
Mhm.
Encourage you to watch it and go in there and ask yourself some really, really tough questions and be real with yourself. I wouldn't look external. I would look inside within yourself and ask yourself some pretty tough questions. And I think it could be transforming for all of us, and our society and humanity needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk so Broken Shepherds. Um, let's pull it up real quick. Let's
Yeah, and listen, Nathan and I don't have the we everything we're doing with Broken Shepherds isn't public accessible right now. He's pulling up the app. Obviously, we have copies of it and such. So if you go searching for brokenshepherds.com and you do all that, we haven't made that stuff accessible to the public yet. And but when we do on 420, we will make sure everyone knows.
It's cool, guys. It's a fun app.
That
Um,
is amazing.
it is an awesome program. Um,
Yeah. Missions, volunteering.
yeah, it's legit. It's exciting. So yeah, V1, which our dev team says this is the most complex and robust MVP or V1 they've ever brought to market. And hey, hats off to our dev team. They have absolutely crushed it. And so they always laugh and they're like, "You guys are bringing like a V3 to market." And so we have spent a lot of time and a lot of energy, and there's been a lot of brilliant
And
minds
money.
involved and money, lots of money, um, in to get this to the market. But so April 20th, this will be public. V2 and V3 will be very close on its heels um, after adoption, and that's where it gets fun. It's we've got some really really cool. Chris used the word game earlier, like gamified aspects of it.
Gamification.
Gamification. It's going to become a game. It's because you can have fun while giving and changing the world.
I
Um,
I want to add to something too, and I think this is important for everybody. We've been asked this question quite a bit and address it. there are no other shareholders involved with this, and we are a for-profit company. There are zero shareholders other than Nathan and I. Zero.
Yeah.
So there is no outside influence. We're not puppets. We're doing this because of love, and we feel called
Yeah.
to do it.
Well, we felt the need, Chris, with your business background and with your understanding of bureaucracy, a lot of people would like to see this disappear.
Yeah,
It's because it's going to question and threaten a lot of revenue streams. And then it's also going to encourage and lift up a lot of
a
revenue
lot of
streams.
revenue streams.
So
Yeah.
we are holding on to this extremely close until it gets national adoption because um, we don't want it to be shelved or scuttled or just bought and then destroyed. Um, and so that is our mission. Our mission is to bring reform to the nonprofit sector, not by way of government, but by way of just accountability and transparency, external accountability and transparency.
For we the people.
Or we, yeah, it's exciting, man. And then, yeah, so that's Broken Shepherds in a nutshell. It's get ready, it's coming.
Absolutely. And one more thing about being a for-profit company. We file with the IRS, all of those things. We haven't made a penny off of anything. We've just been spending money. And and people are like, "Oh, but you're going to make money off of this." We're okay making money as a for-profit company with a transparent, like driven through
Yeah.
transparency. That's
So
that's
this is a big misnomer that a lot of people have. The nonprofit sector, if you're a nonprofit, that doesn't mean you can't make a profit. Nonprofits are some of the most profitable businesses in the world. Hospitals are nonprofits. Universities are nonprofits. Religious organizations are nonprofits. You can be extremely profitable. The only difference is between a nonprofit and a for profit. That's why the term nonprofit is kind of a misnomer. It's actually misleading. Um, the only difference is those quote unquote profits cannot go to inure the leadership of the organization. And so this is what we break down in the show and help educate on is
Nathan, that's a big word, inurement.
what
Can
is
you?
inurement? Yeah.
Yeah.
Inurement is basically to your own benefit. So if you run a nonprofit, Chris, and you have $1 million sitting in the account at the end of the year and you've taken your salary, which is public knowledge if you're a secular nonprofit, it's on your Form 990. So like let's say you make $150,000 or $200,000 a year. So you've paid yourself 200,000, but there's a million sitting. In a for-profit world, if you were the only shareholder, that million could go to you.
Yep.
In the nonprofit sector, it just means that million can't go to you. Now, granted, there's a lot of loopholes and a lot of ways I could get that million to me,
Yeah.
but that's all it means is you can't inure yourself off the profits of the organization. But what does that mean? Profits in a nonprofit can sit. And this is what gets very interesting in the show as we present that argument. So, to your point, we are a for-profit company because we want to be held to the highest standards of accountability in the US, which is the for-profit side of things. The nonprofit side of things is the less accountable side, and then the religious organization side is even less accountable. So we are a for-profit company. We have no problem with profits. Um, we are we do have a fun thing coming, which we present, where we're kind of showing what we think might be the future of for-profit business ventures. Um, and it goes back to this idea of capitalism. There is I believe, a more altruistic way to set up businesses to build local social capital. Because nowadays, a lot of for-profit companies are getting into the local social capital side of things. A lot of for-profit companies are giving back. Patagonia's taken a B Corp pledge. There's a lot of really cool things happening in the for-profit world that for-profit companies are realizing, hey, like local social capital actually benefits us. Like if we raise local social capital in our area of our
Yeah.
consumers, man, we're going to have better consumers. And so the for-profit sector is actually in my opinion, in my research, in my um, conclusion is they're outpacing the nonprofit sector now in regards to local social capital and impact per dollar, per dollar given.
Yeah, and I could make the argument that a lot of for-profit companies, once they're aware of extremely vetted nonprofits, will be pouring money into the nonprofit sector when they had that question answered on who's a great nonprofit that's doing work in X or Y or Z.
Yeah, 100%. So, well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation on Broken Shepherds and this little intro. We are super excited to bring it to market. And it's going to be fun. So, a couple things. Uh, Follow where this video came from. It came from the Broken Shepherds Instagram page. We are going to start posting kind of educational clips from the app on Instagram. So, give Broken Shepherds a follow. That is going to become the main feed for Broken Shepherds and for the technology. Follow the religion business. Follow Chris and I as we bring both of these to the world and get involved with the conversation. And then if you want, go to thereligionbusiness.com and sign up for our newsletter. We're going to start launching a newsletter once a month that just gives an update on the show and the app. It'll, of course, have a QR code where you can download the app when we're ready. And yeah, just thank you all for being a part of the conversation. And again, I apologize for being quiet over the last few weeks. I am still recovering from whatever that was, but we're close, guys. We're like rounding third base coming home, which is super humbling because I'm exhausted.
And check out our trailer. You can find it at thereligionbusiness.com, our Instagram page. It'll point towards a YouTube link. You can check us out on YouTube as
Yeah.
well too. Check out our trailer. Share it, like it, comment, get involved, please.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you, brother.
Love you, bro.
Love you.